Everyone. Thanks for joining us for our closing discussion at Anthology's 7th Digital Teaching Symposium. My name is Darcy Hardy. I met some of you earlier today. I'm Associate Vice President of Academic Affairs at Anthology. I also have the pleasure of directing the Anthology Education and Research Center. In my role, I work with Anthology customers, I work with education leaders, faculty, instructional designers, folks that are in government positions, and more. And in all these circles, you know what they're talking about. Everyone is talking about AI, and specifically generative AI in many cases. The challenges that it presents for higher education or for K-12 education. The opportunities are being discussed. And honestly, as we all know, there's fear, there's excitement, there's my hair's on fire. But no matter what your opinion is, it's not going away. So this afternoon or this evening or this morning, depending on where you are, I'm moderating a panel discussion on exactly that. The challenges and opportunities of generative AI in teaching and learning. We'll talk about the different attitudes that faculty have, the limitations of AI, the challenges for dealing with AI in higher education, and much more. So I'd like to take a moment and introduce our three panelists, and then we'll jump into some questions. As a reminder, if you have questions for any of the panelists or about what we're talking about, please feel free to drop those into the chat, and we will try to save some time at the end to respond to those questions. So first, I want to introduce Dr. Szymon Machajewski. Szymon is the Associate Director of Academic Technology and Learning Innovation at the University of Illinois, Chicago. He's an award-winning educator with decades of teaching experience himself. Szymon also serves on various committees and boards focused on student success, analytics, accessibility, and he's very involved in the Blackboard Community Leadership Circle. Thank you, Szymon, for joining us today. Next, Dana Teixeira, who is a faculty member at the University of Arkansas, Grantham. Dana has been teaching both in person and online for over 20 years, most recently in the Online College of Humanities and Social Sciences. Dana earned her master's in English and has extensive experience with non-traditional students, including adult learners, military learners, and veterans support populations. Dana has been involved in various AI initiatives, both exploring topics such as adoption of new technologies, as well as the impact on course design. Dana, thanks so much for joining today's conversation. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Ashley Dawkins joins us from Lamar University in Texas, where I am also located. We're probably about 3 hours apart. Ashley is the Associate Dean of Policy and Procedure and the Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning Enhancement. And somehow, she also manages to teach courses as an associate professor as well. Ashley brings a wealth of experience in supporting faculty development, particularly in best practices, online pedagogy, and more recently, AI. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing your time with us. So really happy to have this very prestigious group together to discuss this. And I'm going to start by asking the obvious question, I think. Let's do a temperature check for your respective campuses and those you work with. We're living in a pretty much a new era of AI for almost a year now. What is the general sentiment around AI from your faculty and instructional designers? Is it fear? Is it excitement? Is it both? Dana, why don't we start with you? What, just generally, what is the temperature?
Well, I would say if I had weather, I'd say partly cloudy if we were going to do not a temperature check. But I think the initial thing was, my God, am I going to be relevant? I think that's the first thing that most faculty think of is, am I relevant? And then the next question is the bigger elephant in the room, is education going to remain relevant? And then what do we do with this new tool? So I think there's been fear, excitement, and now I'm kind of in the Dr. Seuss mode of, oh, the places you go and the things you can see. So that's my initial comment on AI.
I like that.
Agree
That's a
with
really good way to put it.
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead, Simon.
Yeah, I was just saying I would agree with that. I think it's mixed. There's a lot of fear. I think the fear relates a lot to academic honesty, privacy concerns, and then there's some excitement. How can I use this? How can I simplify my own workflow as a professor? How can my students use it so that they're getting feedback? I think it's a little bit of everything. But I definitely think the fear kind of underlays a lot of it at this point still.
And Simon, I'm going to ask you, but I was going to add, I know when it reminds me, it's different, but it reminds me when online learning really started taking off in the early 2000s and the fears that faculty had about academic integrity and all of those same kinds of issues. Now it's like 10 times more disconcerting for a lot of people. Simon, what's your take on the sentiment on your campus?
Well, Darcy, we certainly have a spectrum of feelings, and these change. We see people kind of flip and become great supporters of AI. We certainly understand the initial fears. In fact, if we take adoption as a science, we do see a lot of parallels to online learning and the fears that were developed around that. But we also see the process of technology diffusion, sometimes called inertia or persistence, meaning that not everybody is going to go along with it. And just like we have COBOL programmers still around and people who simply do not do online learning, not everyone is going to kind of get into the idea of new tools. And I think it's explained well in this paper about entangled pedagogy. So sometimes we put the pedagogical horse right in the wrong place when it comes to the technology cart. And that was, I think, the feeling that instructors had with online learning as well. So what we encourage is this entanglement where ask your students, right, what they're doing with AI and be vulnerable with them and then really learn together. This idea that students and instructors can collaborate while they're uncertain. There's imperfection, there's openness and honesty that's developed though. And so this entangled pedagogy also works for this kind of a new wave of innovation.
So staying with that for just a moment, Simon, because you are working directly with faculty and introducing new technologies all the time, and this is yet another disruptor in the framework. So when they are feeling negative, and you're talking about this entanglement of pedagogy, but what do you actually say to them? Like what do you say to them when you're talking to them one-on-one or when they're so concerned?
Well, I think our role as kind of evangelists and we are the professionals who kind of evaluate these tools early on. We want to give confidence to instructors that the technology they are adopting is not a monster that we're kind of letting in and creating rules of how to catch it later, but in fact that we have agreements. We really appreciate the Anthology trustworthy framework for AI. And so because the AI design assistant was licensed, we had legal agreements, there was a comfort level and confidence that here is well-behaved, groomed AI that the instructors can use. We've also looked towards Grammarly as the kind of a student end tool that's also groomed and behaves well, and it's all within privacy agreements. So I think giving instructors confidence that we know what we're doing, that this is all safely within the institution, that they don't have to go out to those various tools and license them on their own. We basically take AI not as an application that's separate, but as a way of doing things. Just like today, we don't talk about what database is this system running on, or what's the speed of the internet, or does it have a mobile app? It's kind of accepted that it's all there. The AI is just a functionality. It's a way of doing things, and most applications in the future are going to have AI elements. So we bring this confidence to instructors.
Yes, and kind of spinning off of what you just said there about it's the things for the future. I'm going to go to Ashley, who's the policy guru. you know, students have easy access to generative AI. We know that plagiarism detection isn't reliable or accurate. There's bias, there's risk to detect when someone has used AI in assignment. So how do you, in your position, think this is going to change, or this changes the dynamic of teaching and learning and academic integrity with plagiarism and things like that?
I honestly think that it's scary, and faculty, don't know what to do with it yet. And it's something, actually, I was in a meeting this morning, what are we going to write a policy about, and how are we going to develop policy around this? And I think the best thing that's going to come out of it is faculty are not going to have much of a choice but to assess their pedagogy, how they're teaching, making sure their assessments are authentic. A lot of the things that you can do to really ensure that what you're getting is really the student's input depends on how you set up the assignment in the first place, right? And so I think this is going to force faculty to go back and look at that. How are we doing that? Are we doing it in a way that's authentic to what we want them to? Are we connecting it to the things that we've chosen for those courses? And so I don't think there's any real clear-cut lines that we can draw at this point. I think it's, especially with generative AI, it's something we're learning about. But I think it's actually going to make some positive changes. People might not view it that way initially, but I think it's going to be positive in the end. And to that end, I'm going to throw a link in the chat, but I've got a guide I created for our university that talks about some of those authentic assessments and gives some examples. So I'll put that out there for everybody. And I'm also going to throw a website in called Futurepedia. It's a really good resource for those faculty who are getting their feet wet with it and figuring out what AI is out there and how could they use it and how could they tie it to assessment. And I know Dana and I had talked the other day about some things she was doing to incorporate it into her assignment. So maybe you would like to share some of that, Dana?
Yes, please, Dana.
I think that you can either let the tidal wave roll over you and you can drown, or you can get up on the top and do a successful surf. Actually, I've got a group. I'm teaching in class and online. So my class that is hybrid, I'm giving them boundaries for AI. And I also, before AI really cropped up, I looked at my course and said, what can I do, first of all, to be more authentic, and also to, in a way, make it difficult to plagiarize and do things. So first of all, you have to make sure that your assessment's authentic. But I'm teaching, I'm going to use a project management course that I teach as an example. And my students really don't know what a project is. They don't have an idea of a project scope. So I have no problem teaching them in class that you can go to Google Bard or Chat and say, could you please tell me the major steps that one would take to set up a health fair? And it gives them something to think about. Now, my challenge is to make sure that the assignments that are in the class are not just allowing them to take that and dump that in. We need critical thinking. I use templates. So students get 50 steps with health fair. I want you to go higher level. I want you to synthesize ideas. I want you to put them in there. You want to look up costs that are associated with a budget, that's fine, but you still have to find a source that supports a specific cost and put that into your budget. So what I see it as, efficiency, but still requiring critical thinking.
Simon, how are you helping your faculty with authentic assessment in this area?
I think that someone in the comments made the statement that AI changes by the hour. So our policies and even authentic assessment have to keep changing. So, of course, helping faculty to create interaction between students, right? So peer assessment and the ability to evaluate instead of just write paragraphs. Beyond that, including really awareness of AI for instructors who, once they're aware what AI can do, can think about what it is not good at and what it would have hard time fulfilling. So authentic assessment really could for some become in-person examinations, where maybe language studies. I know our engineering school moved to some of that as well, which has many different benefits, because not only do we teach the skills, but also the personal personal interactions, and even practicing in-person conversations. So I think that certainly listening to students here, because remember, we've made a little bit of a mistake with auditing students' examinations with all the software that was so creepy and overwhelming. And we then decided, well, it's better to have a lot of formative assessments and perhaps not rely on summative assessments so much, because again, technology made that a bad experience for students. So we don't want to make the same mistakes here with AI to kind of create a poor experience for students. But certainly the first step is for instructors to become aware what AI can do.
You know, it's interesting, and just as an aside, for those of you who are using Learn Ultra from Blackboard, a little sneak peek, in addition to the AI design assistant that has now been loaded and is built into Ultra, later in the spring, there will be an authentic assessment tool, meaning, I think a lot of faculty struggle with authentic assessments and automatically think, well, then face-to-face, we'll do an assessment that way. But this will actually suggest some authentic assessment ideas for the faculty member to consider. So I think that's really going to help those who, depending on their discipline, it's kind of difficult for people to sometimes think differently than how they've been doing things so far with in the past with assessments. That was my one little plug for Anthology. Okay, let's talk a little about the students. And Dana, I'm going to start with you. How do you feel about the responsibility that the instructors have to ensure students know how to use these generative AI tools, like how to think critically about it and leverage it in a way that's responsible, but that doesn't lead into academic dishonesty?
Oh, I definitely accept it as my obligation. If I don't set some boundaries for the students, they don't know where to go. But, the biggest thing, and I'm going to look at what Ashley said, that underlying fear that faculty have. First of all, I teach because I love to see students that are coming up. I enjoyed my education. I want the students to enjoy theirs. So now we're being challenged to look at what we're teaching and making sure that what we have is relevant and showing them tools for efficiency. And also, I'll give you an example. A student might want to, you're going to write a narrative. There's a big difference between a student going in and saying, could you please write me a narrative that includes a best friend and something bad happened to do that? And AI will spit it out. They absolutely will. But there's a difference between going in and saying, I need to write a narrative. Could you please give me some tips on what can make an effective narrative? And it comes out with things like start out with a hook, consider using dialogue, do that kind of thing. And so use it as a tool. And someone in the chat mentioned calculator, and I'm going to use that as a very good thing. We have students, and we all know that, they use a calculator and all they do is they plug in the numbers and they get the answer. Never once think what's behind that answer, like, wow, if I had 3 decimal points, I've got 3 here. They don't know that. So you can use AI and use it mindlessly, or you can use AI and think. And I go on the side of we can teach them how to use it and think. I don't think that students are coming to school to be academically dishonest, but if we don't have authentic assessments and if we do not capture the interest of those students, I can see where they would look at AI as an answer for what they might perceive as busy work or non-relevant work.
Yeah,
Simon,
and I would add to that. Yeah, I would add to that because if you're not already thinking about in your fields, that you're a specialist in, how this AI might be being used, what jobs your students are going to be going into, and thinking of how that might be used, and thinking of how you can add that to your teaching, I think you're kind of behind. And I hate to say that, but really, I think there's a responsibility to us and our specialties to say, this is how this could be used in the specialty, and we need to make sure they know how to use it. I think if not, the students that we put out, they may be behind other universities that did a better job at that. And so what better place than in the classroom to teach them what might be the boundaries of that, and what's the integrity of it, and how to ethically use it in a way that supports what we do in the real world. So yeah, that's kind of my two cents on that one.
I think it would be worth mentioning a book that came out a few years ago, Thinking Fast and Slow by psychologist Daniel Kahneman. And the reason why is because when our students even think fast, let's get the homework done by typing it in. But the more we think about AI slowly, we realize that the one thing that AI has that people lack is patience. And that is such a tremendous opportunity here. Even the executive order that came out of White House this week stressed that education should really pay attention to possible remediation or tutorial opportunities with AI, right? Because you can ask the same question multiple times. It doesn't get angry. You can now in Bard, you can upload a picture. You can have it read things to you, or generate a picture. I think in Bing right now. But the bottom line is that when the student says, summarize this for me, or explain, or provide examples, or explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, that is a huge, huge advantage. And all instructors need to do today, perhaps, is to start a chat in a tool like ChatGPT, and provide information about their class. And then you can provide a link to that chat right from your course. And so students jump into a context that already was set up. The instructor is able to explain what it is that needs to happen, and AI can ask questions of the student. So that's tremendous, because most of the time we don't know the questions that we should be asking, right? To find an answer, once you have the question, you just Google that, and that works fine. So I think that as we look at really being able to kind of communicate at the speed of thought, because students now are overcoming the barrier of what question to ask, and how to formalize their questions. This patient tool, which AI is going to help them to work at the ideas level, not just the reading and writing level.
Great question, great responses on that one. I think there's some good ideas, and I'm sure folks that are listening, they're also thinking of things that they're doing and how this can fit with what you're suggesting, and the references that you're making. I was a faculty member once back in the 80s, and then I worked in academia for about 30 years. And I know exactly about the load that faculty carry, and that they talk about a lot, how busy they are, and trying to teach, do their research, doing their support in the community, and whatever it might be. So we talk about how AI can offer the potential to make some processes more efficient across campus. But when we're talking about instructors specifically, where do you see the biggest potential for AI technology and to help them be more effective, both in the classroom and online, and or to lighten their load? How can it be helpful? And I'm going to throw that out there, whoever would like to start.
Well, I think somebody said in the chat that, it's the ultimate idea generator. When you're creating assignments and you need a case study, and, you want to put that in and you want to make a good one, but you can get a basis for one from really quick by almost any of the generators. If you're wanting to write an email to a student who maybe they were a little rude to you, and you're writing back and feel like you might be a little rude back, you can use it to tone down your email. There are so many just everyday things, especially writing related, that it can do for you. You can say, here is my topic material. I'm, struggling with maybe an assignment that feels authentic. What's a potential authentic assignment related to this topic? Now, it's not going to be perfect. And that's, we're the specialists. That's why we have to step in and go, okay, here's a good base. What do I change about this to make it relevant for my class or relevant for the level I'm teaching? But it does do a good job of giving us a starting place. And that takes away a lot of time. Even if you're a faculty who has a social media responsibility for your department, it'll create your blog post. It's, again, needs some editing, but it gets that big bulk out of the way for work.
I'm going to echo what Ashley said. I use it for case studies. If I want to, for instance, have a case study on risk, I can ask it, I can give it 3 different companies and say, please identify 3 different types of risks. And also, would you have one with a moderate, a mild, and a high level of risk tolerance, risk appetite? And you can have that. Instead of hunting all over the internet, trying to find all these, it can spit it out for you. And then you can even ask it, hey, do you have any sources where you pulled this from? And it will share it. And then I'm learning more because I can go out and trace down, which one thing, AI still has some problems with sources. They're a little wonky sometimes. I will point that out. And I think the big thing that causes fear with faculty members is there's a great YouTube video out there that shows you that by adding burstiness and perplexity to AI, it can pass any generator and say 100% human generated. So again, trying to sidestep this, I think, is a mistake. And we will just end up, do we really want to go head to head and become law enforcement with our students? We're here to teach. We're here to make a good learning experience.
Simon?
I think, too, it's worth mentioning that instructors are really good at kind of benchmarking and collegiately and collaboratively working together. So looking at posts like the one from Microsoft and others helps instructors to see where they can save time. Sometimes it's tools like in Blackboard Ultra Learn, where you can create rubrics and basically just imagine what the rubrics can be and quickly rebuild them. So what we were looking at here is instructors adopting more tools such as rubrics that they otherwise would not. And they wouldn't because it's very frustrating to write rubrics on your own. Of course, the image generation and even creating modules together, that's a great example of time saving. But what we said earlier, and that is if you provide either a licensed or otherwise shortcuts to a tutor for your class. And so there is, of course, Khanmingo by Khan Academy, which is designed not to give answers, but to lead with questions. So providing these tutorial systems will also help faculty spend less time answering questions and sometimes having to deal with people who have missed maybe a few weeks because of their remedial knowledge wasn't there. So there are opportunities for saving time. However, I know that instructors who truly have their heart in teaching are not going to kind of see the time because they are going to put their work into engaging with students and really helping the students succeed.
Excellent. And throughout all of this conversation, as we talk about AI, it comes up again and again, the need for human interaction, that checking the sources or working with the librarians and the research librarians. I know my biggest frame of reference as far as something disruptive is online learning. And I remember when people thought, well, you're not going to need teachers, you're not going to need libraries, you're going to just do it all online. They don't have to go into the library. And we've evolved into where all of those are needed just as much, if not more. And I think with AI, as you've all stated, there's some wonky things that go on. And someone else pointed out that it's only a year old, basically. So who knows how it's going to look later. But I think the human interaction in the middle all of this is still very important. I also love, though, the administrivia. You mentioned just if you have to do a weekly blog post for your department or something. I mean, things like that are not necessarily related directly to teaching and learning, but are part of the load that faculty and instructors carry. Finding ways to be more efficient using AI is, but again, checking it all first before anything's posted. I have one more question, and then we'll open it up for questions from all of you that are listening to this and watching this. I like to call this the crystal ball question. I love the crystal ball or the magic wand. So you're all in higher ed and you're in different capacities and in your roles. And obviously you've been thinking about AI from not only the higher ed perspective, but your specific perspective in the roles that you play. If you could predict the future, if you could see into the crystal ball, and if you had that magic wand kind of there with you, what's your prediction about the role AI is going to play in the future in teaching and learning? Ashley, we'll start with you.
I think it's going to become commonplace. I don't think it's going to be this big of a topic of concern eventually. I think it's going to help us review how we're teaching. And honestly, I think it's going to become so commonplace. It's going to be like using a work email. It's going to be like using a statistics software instead of hand calculating your research data. You know, I think it's going to become very commonplace for our students, even more so than it is for us. So it's something we're going to have to embrace. But I really think the biggest thing for me is it's going to speed up our workflow and maybe allow us to really focus on our teaching more. That would be my 2 cents. Yeah.
All right. It'll be ubiquitous. It'll be just part of our, everyday occurrence. Dana, what about you?
Well, I agree with Ashley. And, the question will be, you get out of AI what you put into it. One of my favorite stories, which really dates me, Danny Dunn and the homework machine. His father had a computer and Danny figured out how to put all the textbook material into there and generate papers. And he thought that he was gaming the system. At the end of he got a commendation from the school because he did a lot more work. He had to put all of that in there. So I think that the students, that if we can encourage the critical thinking, that's where we are. And I want to make a comment too, that feedback is going to be so absolutely important. I think the day is past anyway, but I think that there are still, hey, you did a great job on this, and the students spent a lot of time on it. And all you get is good job, or this is what you missed. Now, if we take an interest in what that student is producing and we let them know, that student's going to want to produce. And that was my experience in college. The professors that challenged me and said, Dr. Bentley, I will never forget him. We asked about the midterm and he said, I don't expect you to be intelligent for the midterm. And we all went, oh, and he goes, I expect you to be brilliant. And I rose to the challenge. I did. I mean, someone throwing that out there in a positive way. I think that we are at a point where if your passion's for teaching, figure out how this is going to go. And I think the future is going to look great, honestly. I think it's going to look wonderful. I think it's going to give a push to education that has been kind of floating around for a while, but we haven't really pushed it.
Simon, bring us home on this one.
Well, I of course agree with Dana and Ashley. And I would just add that I have great hopes for improvement in academic and scientific writing and publishing. We've had a number of scandals at Stanford where the president was publishing doctored data. And also, I think the Francesca Gino research that also was published, and it was the data was generated. I think we have an opportunity there to provide more rigor, more review, and AI can run to a great detail and really make sure that things come together. The other opportunity is in us decoupling writing from critical thinking. So I think for years, the expectation was that you were able to think critically if you could write about it. And this is going to change now. We will, I think, learn more about critical thinking. And students with dyslexia, students where English is not their first language, their ideas are blocked by this skill of writing and reading as well. So the communication at the speed of thought, I think, is going to be very powerful for education. Today, we have great respect for authors, for writers, because they have those two skills. They can read and write really well, and they have great ideas. Well, now is going to be the time for people with great ideas to take the stage and be able to communicate better.
It's a good point.
Great. I think that all of you have given everyone something to think about. We did have a specific question from Toby Brown that, should we be concerned about writing policies right now when AI is changing literally by the hour? I know we kind of talked about it, in addition to what WCET is doing and what Dr. Davis talked about this morning at Anthology. We're building out a high-level framework for policy development, not detailed, but just broadly looking at some steps. And, the one thing is true, that these are the kinds of policies that will have to be flexible. These are the kinds of policies that you won't be able to put on a shelf and revisit them in 2 or 3 years. Right. These are policies that are going to have to change. Ashley, comments on that?
Yeah, I think that any policies that are generated, like you said, have to be flexible. They have to be very broad. They have to be reviewed regularly. I think there has to be clauses in there that say essentially this is changing and will adapt. Because I know sometimes at universities we like to nail it down and it be the thing. And I don't think we're going to be able to nail it down and make it be exactly what it's going to be. But I do think policy development's important in terms of what is okay and acceptable use and what isn't. I think universities have to decide what that looks like. Otherwise, we do get into situations where academic honesty is a bigger concern. And how do we address that when we know things like AI detectors are not useful? And so I think there has to be policy development, but I think everyone involved has to understand it's going to change and that it has to be checked and re-looked at regularly.
In higher ed, we have a problem with that. We want it locked down and not change. Let me put another question out that's come in from Bettina. What is recommended to protect intellectual property? Who wants to dive into that one?
I could get us started. So intellectual property has been under fire for many years, primarily because it's not a global law. In fact, some countries kind of excel at stealing information and letting their own citizens be kind of without accountability. With AI, the stealing already took place, right? When the large language models were collecting information, but the law was kind of imperfect in that while they were reading the data, they were not stealing the information, and to some degree, they're modifying it when displaying it. So I think the legal system, just as our policies, will have to catch up. But teaching students to cite their work and then to have citations even for the generated content, a way through APA to cite the generated content. We're just teaching responsibility and accountability. But when it comes to the legal issues, there are probably lawyers already working on that.
Yeah, I definitely think it's messy. I think that right now it would be very hard to say to a university, we're all going to embrace this AI and we know that intellectual property is going to be guarded, because I don't think we know that. I did see in another session, people were talking about the idea of we could take students' responses to things or their essays and put it in and have it checked by AI. Those kind of things, intellectual property kind of comes into play, right? So first you, of course, have FERPA and we can de-identify, but that student needs to know you might be taking their data and putting it into there, because essentially you're giving their work away free because it's going to be used to build these learning systems. And so there's a lot of pieces to that I think we're going to be finding out more and more about as generative AI grows. But I do think it's going to be a concern, and it's something that we have to be very careful with as faculty and administrators with how we use that.
Dana, did you want to add something to this?
No, I think that, Ashley points out anything that you ask AI to generate, it's also taking your ideas and it's adding it into that pool. I asked it if it could do a paper and use a particular source, and it came back and said, we're not up to date with, this is the year that we're up to date. So tip for instructors, you might want to see whether AI responds that they have the textbook that you're using. If the answer is they don't, that doesn't mean that you ask the question. Maybe they go find the textbook and they download it. That is possible. But things that one can do, for instance, if you want a writing assignment, is say you must use the sources in the course. They're chosen for a reason, and that's up to us to show why we chose that. But I'll give an example. There are sometimes differences in project management and processes. You might look at PMI, the organization that does certification, and another textbook. Well, the textbook I have, use the ideas from there. I get something that has a whole bunch of sources that are not what we had. I added not an AI issue, I added an accuracy issue to my rubric. So you can also use rubrics to focus in on that. In other words, is it accurate? Are your citations in APA format? Can you even find the citations that the students are using? Those are the types of things that are not singling out a student, but just simply acknowledging that, you can limit certain things. And I think that that's one way. But I agree with Ashley, uploading students' papers and not telling them that you're doing it, and then the student's paper shows up someplace else. Oh, My Course Hero, right? We all hate that site because everybody posts their work. Well, we're creating My Post Hero Ultra, by adding student papers to their database.
Yeah, I think ethics are a big part of this. I wish we don't have any more questions. Are there any closing comments that the three of you would like to make about anything else related to this topic of AI and teaching and learning?
I would just add perhaps that this is the time to learn and to be on the kind of cutting edge of the tools, because they're so surprising. And, AI was developed by mistake or through a kind of the developers never planned to develop what we have today. They were planning to, and were developing systems to complete sentences, to help to recognize things. And suddenly they found out, oh, look, it actually answers those questions. So I think we have to have a very positive view of AI and use it, have that second brain, because that's kind of the bicycle of the mind for today. And certainly those who use it learn about its limitations and can then responsibly use the advantages.
Yeah, I would echo that. Really, really, really get out there and try these AIs for yourself. Put the questions you're asking of your students into there. See what kind of answers you're getting. Learn what that looks like, and then consider how to responsibly talk to your students about that. And again, looking to your own field. How will this be used in your field? Use your crystal ball and your magic wand, like you said, Darcy, and kind of think about what is that going to look like in my specific field in the future, and what can I potentially use these tools to show students how to do that will enhance their ability to work more efficiently and to, be a part of the global community that's AI is building. I think we're being brought together in a new way because of it as well. So, play with it, get on there and see what's available. If you have not done that, that is the first thing and the first step. And go to your centers for teaching and learning and ask for their assistance. Believe me, they are looking at AI. They have no choice.
Thank you. Dan, a closing thought?
I think this is like the most exciting thing that's come along in a lot of time. But I'm going to throw in one thing that we haven't mentioned. There are factors that are affecting education right now, and I can speak to what the pandemic did for the college students. And everybody, I was thinking to myself, well, this is the last year of those students that were there. No, now I'm going to be getting the students that got it when they were in junior high and high school. All of that, and I think that AI has come in at a time where it may actually, as Simon mentioned, it may provide opportunities for students that they've got the ideas, they just haven't had the encouragement to get those ideas out there. I think if we look at it that way, the potential is limitless, actually.
Totally agree. Okay, well, unfortunately, our time is up with these fabulous panelists. So as we're wrapping up this session and this year's Digital Teaching Symposium, or Summit Symposium, sorry, I want to thank Simon and Dana and Ashley. Please give them a round of applause, your virtual applause, your applause in the chat. It's a great conversation. We have a lot to think about as AI continues to progress and makes an impact on higher ed. A couple of housekeeping things before we let you go. If there are any sessions, including this one, that you wanted to catch today but you missed or want to watch again, they'll be available soon on demand in the Anthology community site. I encourage you to join that community so that you can have conversations with your peers going forward, especially AI is going to be around for a while. Want to again thank our sponsor, Respondus, and our supporter, the Anthology Academy, who make it possible for us to have this event. A reminder, you can download your DTS badge of participation now in this platform, and you will each receive a certificate of participation along with a survey via email next week. And at that time, you'll be able to access the digital badge of participation as well. This is the 7th Digital Teaching Symposium we've had, and we're always excited to get the positive and constructive feedback that we get from the surveys and from people posting about their experiences on LinkedIn. We know a huge part of what makes this event successful is the fact that it's peer-led, and it stems from the strength and the engagement of our community. So I want to say a final thank you to everyone who spoke today, who submitted proposals, who engaged in the chat during sessions, and who will share their certificates and their experience on LinkedIn. Thank you for strengthening our community and encouraging your peers to join us. We value your input. We value your insights. We want to make the Digital Teaching Symposium better every year. So please take a moment to complete that survey, and then we'll see you in April for the 8th Digital Teaching Symposium. Have a great rest of your day, afternoon, evening, morning, whatever it might be. Have a good one. Thank you.